Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. Thank you so much for tuning in again this week. I really appreciate all of you out there who come to support our guests as they have such deep courage to come on here week after week and to share with you their grief journey. And today is no exception. I would love to introduce to you Kristen Ryan. Kristen is a yoga instructor. She is a podcast editor. She is a photographer and a health and wellness coach. So I welcome you to our show today, Kristen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank you.
Kristen and I had a few minutes to talk before we started recording, and so I'm going to just set the stage. Kristen has lost two dear friends that we will be talking about today that really started her own grief journey and has really impacted her life. And that's what we're going to be focusing on. So, Kristen, why don't we start with the story you shared with me about Larry?
Larry, yeah. Yeah, he was my first friend, my best friend in Albuquerque when I first moved there. And we worked together. Like, he helped get me my job. And there was a day where his eyes were yellow and nobody would listen to me. I was like, "Hey, Larry, your eyes are yellow." And everybody else was like, "No, he looks fine." I was like, "No." I had to find his ex-wife on Facebook, who I knew they were friends, and like call her to get him to like go to the hospital, which she did succeed in that. I think the hospital was just focusing on the wrong things, and it was 2 years after that he passed. It was right after my wedding, actually. My husband and I eloped, but it was a whole weekend, and so at my I got married on like a Thursday. Friday, I learned that my friend Emily was in a coma, and that was a whole other thing, a more childhood friend.
And Emily, just to put some context around it. So your friend Emily also, she had a kidney transplant, is that right?
Yeah.
And so she and I have a dear friend that has also had a transplant. So you said it wasn't unusual for her to get sick and have to go back into the hospital. But
Oh,
this time,
yeah.
but this time she went into a coma. Was that unusual?
That was unusual, yeah.
Okay.
But, part of you always try to hope for the best, and you're like, "Oh, she's going to wake up, and then in a year we're going to have our 1 year wedding anniversary party, and I'm going to joke that she slept through my wedding." And you think all these things, and but then that Sunday I awoke to the news that she had passed, and of the Pulse Orlando shootings, which my husband and I had moved from Orlando to Albuquerque. We had friends there. So that was, and then I get back to work that like Monday and learn that Larry was in the hospital. And 3 weeks later, through home hospice and such, he passed.
Mm.
I had the
And was that
privilege.
and was that of liver failure? Was that what was
It
he
was
sick from?
internal organ failure. Like basically his kidneys, his liver, like were all like messed up.
And nobody
And
knows why? Like, do they know what happened? Okay.
no,
Okay.
no. I did have the privilege of hearing. I helped him write letters to his son before he passed that I gave to him like incrementally. He's shared things that he didn't share with anyone else. And what do you do with that in the end? Like, one thing I'll never forget that Larry said to me was, "I thought I was ready to go, but now everyone's being so nice and I don't want to anymore." I mean, what do you do? How do you process that other than try to be a better person to everyone else, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what just struck me is that the kindness and love that we show when somebody is ill, whether it's terminal or not, is the way I think we should be all the time, every day with each other. That
Yeah.
love. Yeah, because when he was in the hospital, this is when you found out one of your best friends, Vanessa's cancer came back.
Yeah. It it was and I had the privilege of holding Larry's hand while he passed and staying with his family until they collected the body, keeping them laughing as much as possible. through that ordeal. And I didn't understand at the time. His sister was the one who took care of him in home hospice, and I didn't quite understand where she was coming from because I was there every day, but I didn't physically take part in it as much as she did until my friend Vanessa, who her cancer came back while she was pregnant. She kept going to the hospital. She was going to the hospital there almost every 3 weeks, saying she couldn't breathe. She felt really lethargic. They kept saying it was like pneumonia or her size or this, that, and the other, until 7 months into her pregnancy, they finally did a scan of her lungs and they realized you have 50 tumors through your brains, your lungs, your lymph nodes, and your bones. Whoops, sorry. Like, it's disgusting how we just... And, her family kind of blames themselves for not being more persistent. And I was like, how much more persistent could you be than going to the hospital every 3 weeks?
Right. Exactly. Nobody was listening is the issue, right? Nobody was hearing Vanessa.
No, and nobody heard that, like, she had cancer. It was in remission. She had breast cancer. She was only in remission for a little bit, and they just didn't check. Anyway, they C-sectioned. The baby is fine. He just turned 5. He's living his best life. He is. And
That's so wonderful.
it is wonderful. And yeah, and he has a great, great family, including Vanessa's parents are still very much involved. It's really awesome. But yeah, Vanessa, she was so nice. She's not the kind of person that you would think this should happen to karma wise. I don't know how a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Even though it should happen to no one. But hit me in my grief journey, I suppose, was I ended up driving down to Albuquerque, because at this point now I've moved to Colorado. I drove down to Albuquerque every other week to help take care of her, to try to give her mom and her sisters and her husband a break and stay with her through the night as much as I could. And again, those things whispered in silence, when nobody else is around, are things you hold on to, I think. But Vanessa's end of life journey lasted from May to October, and it was the end of November, or mid-November, end of November. Now I can't remember. I checked myself into the psych ward because I couldn't. It was, as you put it, the last nail in the coffin for me. It really hit home. Because, again, I was there every day for Larry through his home hospice journey, but it's much different when you're participating in it and actually doing the things.
And when you say doing the things, you're talking about really providing the tasks of a caregiver.
Yeah, I'm feeding, changing diapers, medication, all the things that she needed. I was just there for Larry, to chat, to visit every day, and I didn't actually participate in the caregiving side. But I think it's really important for people to understand that's a whole other... You can be there every day through home hospice, but it's definitely not the same as participating and actually actively doing the things, as I said. And you have to have grace for people that have done that.
I'm going to start to cry here because that's what I provided for my mom in the last several years of her life, where she had had a stroke. She lived with my dad, but I would shave the legs and clip her nails and wipe her bottom and do the things, do the very intimate things. You talk about grace, and it's such an honor. It's very difficult to describe to people the honor that it is to provide care to somebody who lets you in at that level. It's an energetic exchange that you can't really put language to, I don't think. And it's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting. It's physically exhausting. And at the same time, you love this person so much and you're helpless to make things better, to heal. So it's a presence. It's a soul presence. Whether people use God or universe or spirit, it is something that is so intangible and yet changes you in a way that you can't quite describe.
Absolutely. You put it beautifully. I would thank her family every day for letting me be there and thank Vanessa for letting
Letting
me
you,
help,
yeah.
but it changes you. Yeah, in a way you can't describe.
So let's talk about that before we talk about what prompted you or pushed you or compelled you to bring yourself to a place of a center that could provide you with the support that you needed from the toll that this had taken on you emotionally. What were your indicators? Try to put to words what was happening for you. I was going to put more language to it, but I don't think I need to. I think you get what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I already am prone to depression and anxiety. And once she was gone, and I wasn't there the night it happened. So for me, it almost wasn't real. And my psychiatrist, I think, was saying I was in shock because it had lasted so long at that point. Yeah, it wasn't real, I guess.
Can I add something
Yeah.
and you can tell me if this is accurate? It's also it's it gives a deeper sense of purpose to our day when we are actually providing care.
Yeah.
And when that's gone, when my mom passed, I mean, I spent every single Saturday with her for 12 and a half years. My brother calls it the 600 Saturdays. And every Saturday it was an honor, even days I didn't want to be there, right? I was tired. But everyone's searching for meaning and purpose in their life. And I really think it's as simple as being here for each other in our pain and in our joy. And so I'm wondering when your friend died, when Vanessa died, if you were left with this sense of
What now?
emptiness. Yeah.
Yeah. What now?
Yeah.
And exactly. And if she, plus it was very jarring because she was exactly my age. So, but yeah, that sense of purpose is gone and nothing else seems important anymore. So yeah, when I already was prone to depression and suicidal thoughts, and then it just got worse for sure. And one night it just got so bad. I knew I couldn't be alone with myself anymore. And I packed a bag and I drove myself to the psych ward.
Which is really incredible. I'm feeling that you weren't safe to be alone because you thought you might take your own life. Is that what was happening for you? So
Yeah.
you had this tremendous courage instead of taking your life to get yourself in a car. Did anybody know what was happening? Did you talk to your husband? Like, were you talking to anybody about what was going on for you?
Kind of. I was crying a lot that day, but I also like may have had a few drinks, and he ended up going to bed. I don't remember why, but he ended up going to bed so nobody knew. He woke up in a panic because he didn't know where I was, even though I texted him and I left notes around the house as to where I was going. He still woke up and panicked. But no, nobody knew where I went. Nobody knew.
So you went to the ER. Is that where you went?
No, I drove myself straight to a psychiatric hospital because an ER I knew was going to take. Okay, so somebody did know my psychiatrist because
Okay.
nobody was taking it seriously enough for me either. Where I was like, I'm not okay. I told multiple doctors, I am not okay. And they were just like, okay, well, and kind of would move on. Or nobody grasped because I guess I hold things together well. Nobody like grasped the severity of what I was trying to say, that I was not okay, until I like checked myself into the psych ward, and I also may have cut myself that night.
So people would listen.
Well, part of it, yeah.
Or is cutting something is that something that you have done in your life to deal with overwhelming emotion, or was this new that you just didn't know what to do?
I've done it a few times. It helps when depression's so bad that you don't feel anything. It makes you feel something.
Yes,
It,
there
yeah,
was a whole month where it was self-injurious behaviors, where we had young people come on and talk about exactly what you're talking about now.
good.
So had it been a while since I mean, I guess I want to make sure our listeners understand that, was this something that you had done it once in a while? Were you, just to kind of pull us into like this particular behavior where after you hurt yourself, after you cut yourself, you're like, okay, I got to go and get real help.
It was something I've only done a little bit of,
Okay.
and only in one spot. And that night I cut myself, I don't, like, probably close to 100 times between both my legs and my arms, which I'd never done before. And I was kind of watching the blood like drip down onto this towel because you can't get blood on the furniture. And I was like, I can't. I have to. And I had asked my therapist before what was the better psych ward to go to. So after she asked around, she said Cedar Springs. So I looked up directions, and you can check yourself in anytime, and I did.
I think I just, I hope our listeners are really listening, that the courage it took to do that. And thank you for sharing it with us.
Of course, it
What
was
happened? Tell us what happened next. So you got yourself
there, and I'm
there.
bleeding from all my extremities. And they call the doctor because they call the doctor to see if it's like they must check you in or if it's going to be my choice, which I guess all depends on insurance stuff. We won't even touch on insurance. Don't get me started on that. But I'm
Or
like,
me either.
yeah, I'm like bleeding from all my extremities. Like my head shaved at that point because I shaved my head for her funeral. Like I look ridiculous. And she was like, well, the doctor said it's up to you. And I was like, and I blew alcohol wise. They have you take a breathalyzer because I said I was drinking. I was over the legal limit and I drove myself there. And they said it was not necessary. They were like, it was up my choice. And I was like, you would let me drive home over the legal limit? Like, you would just release me in this state? Are you serious? So I had to choose to check myself in.
Wow. Just wow. I've been in this field for 29 years, and the stories never, ever shock me or cease to amaze me.
Right. And some people in that facility were wonderful, and some were terrible. The therapist that ended up being assigned to me was terrible. We got in a screaming fight because she was rude to me, and I was like, this is not the time or the place to be like nasty to someone. And she was like, well, I need you to fill out this paperwork. It was a whole thing. We got in a screaming match with somebody in the psych ward. Who does that? Who does that?
I don't
Anyway,
know. I don't know.
so like I said, I've made friends. Like, it's fun now. My husband's like, who are you meeting for coffee? Oh, my friend from the psych ward. But I did the outpatient. I think it was good to do inpatient and separate myself from my phone because you're not allowed to have your phone. There's one telephone like stuck to the wall. I know young listeners won't know what that is, but it's an old school phone. And you have to like know people's phone numbers. So I wrote them down in my journal to like call them. Those are the only people you can call. And my husband did come visit. He was great. I think he visited me every day, but I don't remember very well. And then the outpatient was 28 days, I believe. That was also very helpful with DBT therapy. Learning to cope. I think DBT was really great for
Mm.
someone with grief.
So talk to us. Do you feel like, because this is something I know from my own experience, but also from talking to hundreds of people at this point, that not everybody, not all therapists understand grief work. Did you feel like, I mean, you needed to be stabilized, right? Because you were breaking down.
Crisis.
You were in crisis. So they needed to stabilize you first. How long were you an inpatient? Was that just a few days?
6 days.
And then you transitioned to outpatient. And at that point, did you, what did that look like? Did the grief over your friends, do you feel like it triggered something deeper in you that needed to bubble up and get dealt with before you could even begin to deal with the grief?
Oh, absolutely. I was raised in an abusive situation. I don't want to get into that too much right now. But absolutely, my therapist in the outpatient program was amazing. She's the one that taught grief class, and she helped me realize that my anger all stemmed from injustice, situations that I felt were unjust, like people dying. That's one thing. But any situation where I feel like it's unjust, I get really angry and passionate about it. Yeah, so she helped me make some of these connections that were really helpful. And I learned about like compounded grief and complex grief, and how I had had so many things happen in such a short period of time, and that's why I had compounded grief issues, because I hadn't dealt with everything before like more things started.
Exactly, because what I was thinking, and I've talked about this, that when we have deep losses, it really is like a light that ignites all parts of us inside, and all of our demons come crawling out of the corners. I mean, that's the best way I know how to describe it. And it's where we can't run anymore. I mean, we can try, but grief will always rear its ugly head until we deal with it. But I think it brings up so many things that underlie the grief, that sometimes that's the icing on the cake, right? And there's all of these other things that we need to look at with support if that's what we need to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can definitely relate that it makes all your demons crawl out from every corner and every crevice, because it's been a long journey ever since I had spent a long time not being medicated for my depression and being proud of that, and I have to be. And it's one thing I do want to say is there's such a huge movement for people not wanting to be on medication now, but understand that medication saved my life. Like I wouldn't be here without it.
I think there's two things. I think it's being under the care. Are you still under the care of a psychiatrist?
Oh
That's
yeah.
really, and that from my world, if you are going to be on your antidepressants, anti-anxieties, there is certainly a place for it in our culture. Then there's over medication, etc. And there's a lot of side effects to different medications. It's trial and error. So the only thing I want to say to everybody listening, if you are on meds, it's just to make sure that you are under the care of a psychiatrist, not just your doctor,
No, yeah.
somebody who actually understands what these medications do, and potential side effects. So continue. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely important. When I was in my early 20s, my primary care doctor put me on a medication and it did not go well at all. So that's why I was terrified to go on medication ever again. But it does help when you're, like you said, under the care of the right doctors. And it can be scary to go to a therapist, but let me tell you, man, it changed my life. Like, it really, really helps.
I'm glad to hear that. I am so happy to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, I was terrified to go on medication again. But here I am, still medicated, still doing fine. And I still believe in lots of like naturopathic stuff too. Like diet change, and I've done all the things.
And,
Like,
and, and you're a yoga instructor.
and I became a yoga instructor. It's, yeah. all the
And
things.
yoga is amazing. And I agree with you. It's some of the alternative things that we can do to self-regulate, self-calm, get in touch with our breathing, just our breathing that we take for granted. Just be aware and be present in our body. And I love that you are talking about this and that you are a yoga instructor.
Well, it's funny is when I was going through my yoga teacher training, that's what put me back in therapy because I thought I was okay. And then when I was going through yoga teacher training, I realized I was not okay. That's when I went back to therapy. Recent years.
Because yoga, you were present with yourself, right?
Yup. I was present with myself and I was like, wow, I'm not okay. Guess I'm going to go back to therapy.
That's great. Talk to us about, I mean, obviously you've got this amazing, just, I can just feel it too. Like you deal with things through humor, right? I can tell that is part of your, it's a strength. It's an incredible strength to
Well,
have
thank you.
humor. It is. I love to laugh. And sometimes life can be so hard. I will often say you can't really do anything but laugh, right? Because sometimes it's ridiculous the things that get stacked up in our life
Yeah.
that that can really tear us down. And so I'd love to hear from you. So you did inpatient, you did outpatient, you're seeing your therapist now. If you, how would you describe your grief journey and really what has helped you most through the process? I obviously I hear that therapy has really hurt you, but even in your therapy, was it grief work is very difficult to describe to people because it looks different for everyone and it is, and so I'm just curious in your story, what do you feel like things that you've done? You did yoga, what other things have you done to help you along this grief journey?
And understanding like how everything had compounded onto me and I hadn't dealt with everything. Understanding really helped. So, and that's helped me through all my illnesses. I have other things wrong with me too, but like understanding what's going on has helped me through everything. Truly. What really, really helped were the grief classes that my therapist taught in outpatient. She taught grief class once a week and really going through that process of understanding grief and understanding what was going on with me and that I'm not crazy. I can't just sit back and not know. Yeah, understanding, I would say. And understanding myself, because that happens through yoga and meditation and really looking inside myself and seeing what's wrong. And I can say, like, oh, this is hurting, this doesn't hurt usually, something is wrong. You know, being able to kind of self assess. And then you know where to go for help, be it physical or mental.
And in your self-assessment, what do you feel like your greatest strengths are that really have also helped you through this? First, for I can just name a couple. One is your courage and your openness to even under trying to understand what is happening for you and knowing when it was time to go get help. What else in you do you feel like have really helped you on this healing path? And your humor, I have to, humor is a very powerful medicine, I will say. What else though about you?
For me, being open and honest and humorous about things, I think are really helpful. Those are the things, like knowing yourself, being open and honest and helpful, like, and humorous. Like, there's no, when you bottle stuff up and don't talk about it, it makes it all worse. And I have realized by talking about a lot of this stuff openly, a lot more people have been to the psych ward than you realize. Fun fact.
Wow, that's such a fun fact, Kristen. We all could go at one point or another in our life. I can tell you that.
You could. It's really a good experience. Sit down, be with yourself, not with your phone. color. I have funny psych word stories. That's for another day. But yeah, being open and honest about it, then other people open up and are honest about their journey, which again, I think helps everybody and kind of ties it all back to what Larry told me, like days before he died, is I thought I was ready, but now everybody's so nice and I don't want to go anymore.
I I love so much that when we have the courage to be deeply vulnerable, right? This is what Brene Brown talks about, our vulnerability, because we all carry so much shame for being human. It's
Unreal.
it's unreal, actually. And when we take that one step and open up, I mean, this is kind of what Glennon Doyle has done, right? And we see these remarkable people who have shown up and told the truth. But when we have the courage in our life to say, I'm human and I need help and I need some support, how it opens the doors for other people to be human too. And I've said this so many times, it's not my saying, but we're here to see each other through, not see through each other. And I think sometimes we get in our bubble and we don't see each other. Another beautiful saying, to know your heart is to know mine. Like we
Yeah.
are all the same. We are all connected. And if we could just hold each other's hands and to see each other and walk each other home, I think that I, and then there's people like you who just are able to come on and tell your story. Who knows how many people are going to hear this and how it's going to impact them.
And I hope it, I've suggested to a few people to check themselves in. It, it changed my life. DBT therapy changed my life, and therapy's changed my life, and I think hopefully for the better. So I hope to everybody listening, don't be afraid to seek help. It can seem really scary because you don't want to open that door. But I promise when you do open that door, it feels so much better.
I'm happy to hear that because of what I do for work, quite frankly. But I think that as hard as we are trying to reduce stigma, somehow people still feel that going to therapy is a sign of weakness. And there's nothing really that can, I think, dispel that stigma until you try it, right? If you find, and like therapists, just like any other vocation, there are good ones and there are not so great ones, or there are really great ones that you just don't necessarily click with. You don't need to click. Like if you don't click with the therapist, go find another one. I often will say to friends who want to get a therapist, interview them. You're hiring them. You are hiring your therapist. That is what you are doing. Just like you would hire someone to come in and paint your home, put in your flooring, do whatever. It is the same thing with your therapist. You are hiring them for a service, and it just happens to be about you. It's to help you. And sometimes therapy is very short term. Maybe you're going through a transition. Maybe it's grief work. No matter what it is, if it's a divorce, it doesn't have to be loss of a human. We feel deep, deep grief over loss of a job, loss of a pet. Whatever it might be, whatever life transition, therapy can also be very temporary, or it can be a lifelong thing. It doesn't matter, but make sure that if you want to get help, you're hiring them and you have the right to interview therapists.
You do. I've gone through multiple that I do not like, and we did not click.
Right.
Just throwing that out there. Yeah, definitely quite a few that I haven't. And you can even grieve the loss of growing and moving beyond certain friends. That for me hurt really bad when I had to leave some friends behind.
Yes. Which is not very uncommon in grief work in general. We are at the top of the hour. I could really spend a long period of time chatting with you, Kristen. But to bring us full circle, I always ask, What does self-love look like for you now? How do you practice self-love?
I still don't think I'm good at it. I read a meme recently that talked about self love versus self aftercare. Like doing self care or aftercare. Are you actually taking care of yourself before the things happen, or are you doing aftercare after something happens and then you're settling down and taking that bath? So I still haven't found that yet, but I'm working on it.
Fair enough. I think that I would say the same is true for me. I'm not great at it either, but every day I try to do one thing that is just for me. If it's a walk, if it's a favorite show, if it's a book, something for me that brings me peace or some element of joy. And we're all a work in progress, Kristen. Right? We're all just a work in progress. Okay, people are going to want to know where to find you. Do you have an Instagram channel?
Yes, my Instagram is at bird bear moon, like bird tweet bear rar moon, like the moon. That's my Instagram, and you can message me or follow me on Instagram. And I post a lot about ADHD right now.
Okay, and we'll also have your information in the show notes. Kristen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing your story. Thank you, everyone, for showing up this week. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you all next week. Bye for now.